Yeah, we have new metrics, so we look at faces differently. What's interesting about our history is we started with mid-20th century, we'll say heterogeneous population, but the corruption of facial anatomy was already built in, right? So you have metrics that are based on corrupted norms. Well, it's like anything in medicine, they take everybody, do a study, come up with the distribution of whatever measurement they're looking at, and create a bell curve. And they create a mean, and they really think disease usually occupies the tail ends, either the high or the low, and everything in the middle is normal. That's simply not a good way to look at things, right? For instance, if you had low thyroid, your life would be a mess. You'd feel horrible. Do you want to feel horrible but be in the normal range? Wouldn't we rather what's the optimal, right? What's the optimal level of thyroid? Can't we seek to achieve that? Well, it's the same thing with the jaw structure. If I was doing a study about facial jaw architecture, what I would do is take two things. I would either look at, by everybody's subjective opinion, that's a beautiful face, that's a beautiful face, that's fully developed jaws. Let's do measurements on them and come up with the ideals. Now we have a reference point. Or I would look at cultures that weren't contaminated with Western diet and airborne exposure, and they have fully developed jaw structures, and do measurements off them. So the point is, we don't even see it unless you're looking for it, right? Well, in our research and the institute I work with, we feel like 90% of our population is mid-face deficient, and there's some really cool reasons why that is. And I should say that is the cornerstone. If the upper jaw, mid-face, because it's one bone, people think of the teeth and the bone as part of something, we say the maxilla, but it's actually all one bone. What does that mean? Nasal cavity, floor of the orbits, part of the cheekbones, the malar process, and the entire housing, the alveolar housing of the teeth, that's all one bone, palate included. And that can be underdeveloped entirely in all three dimensions, meaning even the nasal cavity can be underdeveloped. But the issue is, if that structure is underdeveloped, the lower jaw has no choice but to react to it, and it becomes entrapped or underdeveloped. And that's sort of the source of all of the bite problems that we experience. Joint, muscle damage, all of that relates to the underdeveloped upper jaw. The lower jaw has to react to that because it's a biological need for survival. It's really interesting, right? The lower jaw is going to find a way to fit into its defective counterpart because chewing, eating, swallowing is high-level priority for survival, right? Like right underneath breathing. So but the body has a number of situations where it will sacrifice long-term health for short-term survival. You see that over and over again in all kinds of areas within the body. Well, this is another one. The body is not going to be concerned about airway, for instance, and breathing, or the jaw joints being very badly compressed, or the muscles being unhealthy, or the posture of the cervical spine. The body cares about short-term survival, which means you got to find a way to fit your teeth together, and that's what it'll do. And so this cultural problem, and others have beautifully identified the difference, looking at different cultures, particularly, we say, primitive cultures, but even more to the point, you can go back and look at Paleolithic ancestral species, our predecessors, right? The Homo sapiens, we fit the same group, we're in the same family. Guess what? They have beautiful, fully developed jaws, way more forward jaw structure. And as it turns out, we share like 99.7% of the same DNA. So there's not an argument about evolution in smaller jaws. It's environment, corruption of the facial growth by and large. There are certain little exceptions to that. And when you have corrupted jaws and you have corrupted breathing, guess what? You have corrupted posture. Your entire life, you're relegated to another reactionary problem with a narrow airway. Your brain's going to do this. You can't resist the reflex of extending the head forward to open up the airway. What does that do? That throws off the whole body structurally. It locks up and damages the upper cervical component. So my contention is, postural corruption is driven in large part by the posture of the head over the spine, which is driven in large part by the airway. So underdeveloped jaws, underdeveloped airway, forward head posture, postural corruption, and the ensuing damage that can happen over time as a result of that.